And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'll be your host, I guess, today for the content as we go through. I'm the EVP of Customer Experience here at Corporate Visions, of which in Blaze is our insights engine. And thank you all for joining us. And for those of you listening to the recording as well, thanks for tuning in. But before we even dive in, I'd love to invite our panelists respectively to introduce themselves, their companies, their role at those organizations, three individuals who I know have a lot to say around the topic of customer expansion. So let's just go down the list and Hang, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi there, my name is Hang Black. I am the Vice President of Global Revenue Enablement at Zoominfo. So in my role, it's really important to make sure that we make our buyer experience as best as it can be by equipping our internal sellers and customer success teams to be the best sellers and interface as possible.
Awesome. And I love the fact that the title is revenue enablement and not sales or customer success all in one. And we'll talk a bit about that. But Amanda, welcome.
Hi, my name's Amanda Berger. I'm based in San Francisco, and I'm the Chief Customer Officer at HackerOne. HackerOne, we make the internet safer by connecting ethical hackers to all sorts of companies and government entities to find security vulnerabilities before the bad guys get to them. And my responsibility is every aspect of the post-sales customer journey, making sure that our customers always receive lots of value from the work that we do.
Love it. Ethical hackers, perhaps my favorite two words back to back right there. That's fantastic. And Tony from SAP, please.
Hi, thanks, Doug. Thanks, everybody. Hi. And my name's Tony Ponte out of Pennsylvania, Newtown Square, Pennsylvania. And I lead the Scale Engagement Center at SAP. SAP is a pretty large software company. And my team covers two basic areas. One is a virtual customer success partner, so a virtual CSP, and also frontline support for our customers and partners. And I've been part of the ASP and Blaze for, my gosh, I think 15 years now. So it's been an amazing opportunity to collaborate with some awesome people. So looking forward to spending some time with you guys today. Thanks, Doug.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Hang. I'm just going to set the context a bit with just two quick slides around just framing for the conversation around customer expansion. And I will pull up my screen. And by the way, folks, as Cam said earlier, please have the chat box open. You're welcome to put questions, comments as we go. I've got some starter questions for the panel, but of course, would love your insight along the way. And this first picture that we gladly grab a piece of paper, draw along, if you will. Amanda, I'm actually going to pick up on your point of the fact that it is really the entirety of the customer journey that yields customer expansion or not. And so, in fact, like if you just draw a straight line across your page, if you use that to indicate sort of the entirety of a buyer's journey, as we all know, it actually starts on the sales side of the house, even just locking down that first purchase that a company has with your organization. And there's a lot of great work that occurs in that pre-sales motion, convincing a buyer to change, convincing them to choose you. But obviously our conversation today is really to the right of that first buy. But as we think about it, and as we look at the research behind customer expansion, it's not just purchase once expansion happens. There's a lot that happens. In fact, in a lot of organizations, and I know Tony will speak to this a little bit later, the first major motion in customer expansion, if you will, is actually the implementation and adoption of the solution up front. And the fact that if that doesn't happen well, the expansion may be put at risk, because there does come a time after implementation and adoption where you solidify the customer status quo as you, fully changed from where they were. But there's a lot that goes into that motion. And if that motion goes wrong, expansion might be at risk. But even once that implementation and adoption is had, and I know all three of our panelists can speak to this in great detail, if you aren't documenting customer results and customer value across the lifetime of the relationship, again, the research shows you're not going to have as solid a foundation to renew and expand the customer relationship. And even though today we're talking squarely about customer expansion, that is, of course, just one of multiple motions that could happen with an existing customer. Yes, you could have expansion, and hopefully there's cross-sell, there's upsell, and hopefully the relationship continues up and to the right. But of course, depending on the customer relationship, sometimes it's just a win, that they renew their existing agreement. And that you set the table for expansion by just delivering on what you've got, and they stay with you. Especially in this economy, we know that is often a critical component of setting the stage for future expansion. And I hate to even raise it, but there is the not rainbows and unicorns portion of the relationship where sometimes there is a service failure. Sometimes there is a service failure in the experience. But thankfully, the research does show that if you handle that moment right, service recovery can get you back to where you were before. And so again, just a framing device of, yes, our conversation in the panel is absolutely going to discuss today supercharging this motion of expansion. But we all know that our customers aren't all going to expand and aren't all going to expand at the same time. And so there's a lot of other things that take place in this post-sale environment that contribute to that or not. But one of the second quick thing I'd like to just plant the seed in the audience's mind before we go to the panel discussion is that across all of these motions on the page, from the moment a customer first buys to the moment they make their next purchase, whether renewal or expansion, something typically happens in a lot of organizations that we work with is that contract gets signed, everything is hunky-dory up front, but then the next actual selling motion doesn't occur until late in that customer's existing contract. Sales comes riding to the rescue, saves the day, and takes all the credit for all the excellent work that happens across the life of a customer contract. And I know with Amanda, with Tony, we've got some great customer success post-sale leaders on the call here, and you heard Hang enabling these teams. There's so much that happens in between that contributes to customer expansion. Here's the challenge, though, and what we see missing at times, is that even when customer success is doing excellently, even when delivery, implementation, adoption is all going according to plan, we see too often companies creating a messaging void in their post-sale experience. And not a messaging void. Obviously, there's tons of messages going back and forth between you and the client. Specifically, what we would call a commercial messaging void that opens up between you and your clients. Because think about it, your clients are getting bombarded with messaging each and every day from competitors, from partners, from analysts. Everyone's vying for their attention. And specifically with competitors, they are vying to take that customer away from you. And so a lot of customer expansion is really just about how do you remove that messaging void and feed your customers the right messaging across the customer lifecycle to ensure that they are going to expand with you. And that's having critical business reviews after onboarding. Where are we? How are we documenting results? How are we defining value? As you keep going through the relationship, talking about why evolve and expansion business reviews. Then again, I know, Tony, you're in a different spot on the virtual side, but how do you keep top of mind for that client as they go through the relationship? And from Hang and Zoominfo's perspective, how do you ensure that all of these teams have the right information as they progress through the customer relationship? But one of the other things that we see happen is that too often, see a lot of companies try to expand, we call that why evolve, right at that last contractual moment. Research shows that's not your best effort at that point. At that point, you should be anchoring on the renewal conversation towards that contract expiration. Expansion needs to occur before. So I just wanted to plant both of those seeds here before I dive into the panel discussion. One, expansion isn't just one motion. There's a lot that happens. There's a lot that precedes it to ensure that expansion happens. And then two, it's not just messaging. It's the right type of messaging, the right commercial messaging along the way. And so with that, you have already heard way too much from me. You didn't come to listen to me talk today. You came to listen to our panelists. So let me throw it open to the group, and I will go round robin on this, and then maybe I'll address some. But I love the group's perspective on this first question of what do you believe, and what has your experience shown you are the necessary prerequisites to expanding a customer relationship? What are the necessary prerequisites? Amanda, I saw you come off mute, so I'll go to you first if you don't mind.
Sure, thank you. Every customer is a little bit different in terms of how they measure business outcomes and what they're looking to get out of the solution that they're implementing. Even when it seems like a very straightforward solution where companies would measure revenue or something, a simple metric, there's always very nuanced. So the key is really aligning with how customers are going to think about it and making sure that you absolutely demonstrate that value to them. Like, don't trust that they are going to see it on their own. Demonstrate it at every single interaction. I think being able to do that unlocks a lot of trust and thus opportunity for expansion. But if we're not able to do that and align with it, then it really closes doors because somebody else will.
Absolutely. Our CEO had mentioned to me once, I lead our customer experience here. It's not just agreeing on what constitutes value, it's customer acknowledged value. That they have actually said, yes, I have received that. I think that's a critical part. But Tony, your thoughts? What are the necessary prerequisites to expanding a customer relationship?
Amanda said it really, really well. I completely agree. It is around trust, right? And you earn that trust by helping the customer understand the value that gets created. Doug, you said the same thing. Oftentimes, it may be hard and they may not know. I think up front, if you show that you can share best practice and really are in to support the value generation that the customer wants, that builds the trust. And then you earn the expansion early on, to your point, right? You don't earn it at the end, you earn it day to day to day, right? To stay and then to expand. But it is earning that trust through the value that gets created.
And Hang, what have you seen on your side?
On my side, I look at the full life cycle. So when we're selling, it's all about customer verifiable outcomes to make sure that we are aligned on the outcomes that they want to achieve. To Amanda's point, once the sell has been done, how smooth is the transition and handoff to reach that customer acknowledgement of value realization? There is a lot of trust building in there, but I think it's also caretaking, making sure that you're there for them in the way that they want to be cared for. Some customers, as Tony and Amanda, I'm sure, have, and yourself, Doug, have experienced, some want very, low, no touch, and some want some want and need very high touch. So making sure that we address them, not how we think is good for them, but what they would want to be, how they want to be approached, I think is really important.
Sure. You said a word there that I would love to excise from the customer vocabulary of the handoff or the handover, because that is where so many relationships do fall down. But in that, whether or not your organization has a handoff, a handover, or a nice pass of the baton, I know in our prep for today, we all were talking about the importance of implementation, of adoption, of the smoothness of that early stage motion. So Tony, I'd love your thoughts there. I know you've done some interesting work around that topic at SAP. What have you found as most critical in that early stage implementation adoption motion that has fed a better expansion opportunity?
Yeah, and it's a couple things, and they're obvious, but you need to make sure that you do it, right? One thing is, especially when you're thinking about ERP software or some complex software, that's what we do at SAP. So we got to make sure that we share our best practices and the customers get it, number one. Number two, there is an implementation plan, literally writing down to say, here's our plan for implementation with a targeted go live. Targeted go live is important. And making sure you have the right people component, right? The training and the the training and the education that needs to happen around the software. And I think as you do those things, an implementation plan, you're sharing best practices, a timeline with a people component enablement, the go lives happen. You're always going to have challenges, but they happen. And first use and then ongoing use happens. It's fascinating to see if you don't have those components, the odds of shelfware increasing is pretty high, and the odds of usage is pretty low, and the expansion is pretty low. So it's that literally writing down a plan of with some timelines and some commitments helps you get to that expansion.
Amanda, how about from your side? What have you seen in that early stage motion that's been helpful, or not, perhaps?
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I think I've been doing this for 25 years. And even now, I still find that a lot of times companies implement whole new systems and don't realize it's going to change workflows and create a lot of work. And so the team that was championing, bringing in the new system or whatever it is, has this sort of concept of it, but really hasn't gotten organizational readiness and buy-in to follow through. So I think that's so, so important, because once it becomes embedded within the organization and the workflows and sticky, then expansion becomes this very natural thing. Right. But until that happens, it is just a really, really big obstacle. So thinking about that in every single interaction is absolutely key.
I think one of the things that your comment sparks for me is at that moment of sale, and Hang, you referenced the handoff, and I think why that bugs me so much is that oftentimes there are so many new stakeholders that come in implementation after the sale that have no idea why the thing was bought, no idea I thought things were okay, but why are we changing and doing something different? And if the sales and customer success and delivery arms don't all work together at that moment, that can be a huge moment of disconnect at that moment in time. But Hang, I'm interested, again, to the earlier comment of you have revenue enablement, not just sales, not just customer success. You have both. How has that helped drive customer expansion, or how has that helped at least increase the communication between the post-sale teams to have it under a common enablement umbrella?
Good. So definitely we've seen huge benefits to moving from sales enablement to revenue enablement, because our customers are people too. They're not just people when they're prospects. They're also people, and even more important when they become customers, because they have in return trusted us. I just got off the phone with Brent Adamson earlier this morning, and a lot of you know he co-wrote the Challenger Method. And there was a time when it was, we transitioned from product selling to solution selling, and then from solution selling to insight selling. In this moment of time, when the buying committee are somewhere between 11 to 26 stakeholders, part of what we have to do as part of the selling team, and I'm including the customer success organization in that, is to make sure that we help them uncover the landmines, help them build confidence in themselves in that they made the right decision, because they're taking a gamble on the product that they've just purchased, right? Matt Dixon just wrote a book called The Jolt Effect about FOMO, fear of messing up, and a fear of missing out. So because of the macroeconomic trends that we have right now, how do we make sure that we share with them the landmines in our implementations? Yep. We have seen not just you as the champion, but the other 14, 15, 25 people in the buying committee. These are the landmines for them. So helping them navigate through their systems and processes is super important. And I think a very first principle of customer success. But I'd love to hear what you as CCOs have experienced in that.
Yeah, I'm interested there too. Amanda and Tony, what have you seen from the alignment of sales and customer success in the expansion motion? Is it working well at your organizations? Have you figured something out perhaps that's worthy of repeating? Would love to hear your thoughts on that. It's a key question right now.
I think that the move to so many meetings digital has made it hard in some ways. I think in order, we all go into accounts, at least we do at HackerOne, and I think we probably do at many companies now, but there's lots of people that are involved in the customer, and the importance of triangulating and gaining trust and building relationships on many different levels is important. And so many meetings now are just a lot of people sitting on Zoom calls. And it's, I think, very, very hard to do that. It's much easier to do that when, you're all at lunch and somebody's sitting next to one person, someone's sitting next to another, and there's an opportunity for those side conversations that Zoom just isn't good for at all. So I think what I've seen is a challenge in having to find new ways to identify what exactly the responsibilities of everybody in their role is, and sort of where that allows us to create bigger, broader relationships. But like Hank said, there are so many stakeholders within customers. People move around more readily these days. And so being able to cross-functionally drive that so we can really work towards alignment within the customer's organization as well as ours throughout the cycle.
Well said. Well said. We're trying to get rid of the handover term. I don't like the term. I don't think anybody likes the term. It's like, okay, great, I can hand it over to you. And trying to get as engaged in early in what success means, whether it's selling the right software, making sure the implementation plans are the right things to drive the value the customer needs. So as closer as we can get in blending the roles almost between sales and success, we're trying to do that. It's not easy, but really this handoff, sales handover is, how do we call it, a transition or something? We're working on different terms to just, it's the end-to-end journey of a customer. They have a problem they need solved, they value they need generated. How do we work together to make sure they realize that?
Yeah. Across the last 12, 24 months, you've all sort of alluded to it. Macroeconomic factors have played a role in our collective ability to grow. There's no sense hiding the ball on that. Yeah. And expansion has become harder. In a lot of organizations, the straight renewal is the win right now, and that's totally okay. But I'd be interested for each of you, and I'll chime in on this question as well. But what's one big thing that you've put into play in your organizations across the last 12 to 24 months that you have seen have a direct impact on expansion? So again, what's one big thing you've put into play in your organizations over the last 12 to 24 months that has had a big impact on expansions? Whoever would like to take that one first is more than welcome to.
I'll take a stab at that. Over the last 4, we spent quite a bit of time, as we handle a lot of customers as volume, right, in a virtual way. The team spent a lot of time making sure we had the value journey clearly defined, with a defined set of touch points of when to engage with customer and how to help them. And I think that not necessarily it does or does not help expansion. It's more of how do you make sure you get to first go live and then first use? Because I think if you do that right, the other things happen. But that to me, and it's going to be a key part of what we do going into 2024, as we see a lot of growth, is just a defined journey where there's key points or key moments, if you will, that we're helping the customer through that journey. And how do we make sure each of our CSPs has the right assets and content to support that customer? So it sounds kind of basic, but it's just an important, understand the process, educate the customer on the process. Here's what you're going to go through, and then make sure that we're there to help them. I think we're seeing that pay off from better realization of go live, first implementation, first use, and then it's gonna lead into the consumption increase, and then it'll lead into the expansion.
If I could summarize your responses so far, Tony, it seems to be do the simple things really friggin' well, and it helps a lot.
Yeah, better said than I've done. Yeah, simple standard process. Sometimes, you go back to the basics, and lo and behold, it works.
Yeah, Hank or Amanda, how about in your organization?
I think Tony's absolutely right. And one of those simple things is assessing customer health, and being really honest in that assessment. So I've spent a lot of time over the past year or two really fine-tuning how we look at customer health, like how much of it is sentiment, how much of it is adoption, how much of it is engagement, and then being really honest about what a different customer health score means and what the actions that we need to take to nurse that customer back to a healthy point. There's no chance that customers that aren't healthy are going to expand, and very, very high chance that they're going to retract or deflect and not be customers anymore. So being very honest about that and sort of holding up a mirror has been really critical in being able to sort of break through that.
Sure.
And I think I love the going back to basics, Tony. Like that is so foundational. It's one of the first things I always do when I enter a new company. It's like, how well are our foundations? Before we dress the home with furniture, how are the foundations, the frame, and the walls, right? So that's the first thing. But I wanted to pinpoint, especially with digitalization and AI. I mean, how do we have a conversation without AI these days?
Right. Making
sure we don't abuse AI. And what I mean about that is, yes, we've got the high touch, medium touch, and now implementing tech touch for those who want less direct human engagement. We still have to remember that AI is the beginning. it's the first draft. We still have to remain very, very human in our engagement. Amanda and I had a conversation separately about, at one point we went all virtual, and then we realized maybe that was such a great idea. So there's a reason and a season for each type of interaction. Being able to regularly meet the customer where they are on that journey, and then actually going to Amanda's point about honesty. A straight renewal would be nice, but the fact of the matter is you haven't used all of these licenses. How about we trade those dollars for these other bells and whistles that might be useful for you? So it's a win-win for both sides of the conversation. With Zoominfo, because we have such a rich portfolio, it's a better conversation to be able to trade dollars and value and be honest about you're not great at getting value because you've constricted on the number of people you're hiring. How about we do this? And lo and behold, sometimes you've been able to introduce to them a value that might actually become an upsell.
Yeah.
And I'd add to that, Hang, all in service of, the customer outcome that the customer wanted all along, right? And where they want to go. Amanda, you said something that triggered a question that I think will be interesting to the group in this moment, and it was around customer health. And I agree, like the honesty in customer health scoring is important. But I'd love the group's perspective on how well have your customer health scores served you in the past 12 months. I've seen a debate out there on LinkedIn and in other spots of how predictive or not customer health scoring is. And I think, Amanda, you provided some great guidance on what makes it more predictive when you are honest about it. But I'd just be interested in the group's thoughts around that. How predictive has health been in customer renewals, expansion, and as a marker of that expansion opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's been very predictive in churn. Typically, if a customer is red, there is a good chance that they'll churn. It hasn't always been the other way around. Like there are sometimes customers that we think are green that it turns out they're not nearly as healthy as thought. And I think that's not being, when I usually look at that, usually you do the analysis and you see, well, there was something that we missed there. One of the big things that sort of goes back to our earlier conversation about like building champions throughout the organization that we often miss is that maybe we had one champion or two champions in the organization, and one of those people changed roles and somebody new came in, and suddenly that introduced a lot of risk. No matter how healthy a customer is, if that's the case, and that sort of how many champions do we have in an account isn't a factor in the health score, then that is going to create a lot of risk. And that is something that I think we all see a lot in this economy. Another thing that this is sort of like tried and true is that like if a customer isn't being responsive, they should be red. And I feel like I've had to say that to teams over and over and over again. Like, doesn't matter what you're seeing from, engagement or adoption. If they're not responding to you, they're red. And so again, there's this whole sort of honesty and reflection in that health scoring that I think is important to identify before you say, okay, well, it works or it doesn't.
I like the responsiveness point. Tony or Hang, any thoughts on the customer health score question?
I think that's the corollary to that one is usage. If they're not using, your software, or if they haven't logged in, there's probably a problem there. But we try to fit those components into a health score, right? To get all the different pieces. So I think that health scores are interesting. They're a part of the exercise. Nothing better than having an honest conversation with a customer around their sentiment for how things are going, right? So you get a combination of the customer feedback and sentiment. You get the health. Really good point on kind of the macro stuff that's going on with the overall organization. So it's a combination of different things versus just using one. Yeah. I sure know we're spending a ton of time trying to get smarter with the health scores. And if we put this component and this component and all together to get with this magical number, that'll help. But you still need to have the engagement and the other things to look at a holistic picture.
I love that.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I love that usage does not equal happiness, right?
Yeah.
But it's an indication that they're attempting to. And I think as you continue to have a conversation with them to talk through how is it working for you, and have you thought about this, so that you're clearly continuing to care for them and to ensure that they're getting the value realization they want out of it. To your point, one of the things that we've looked at before has been, whether you engage with customers through Slack or other channels, how much are they engaging back with you? Amanda, I think that was a really great point as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think sometimes we try to be very coy about this and look for hints in our customer interaction about whether or not they're going to renew or expand. And we need to remember to just be honest. Like Tony said this, just sit down and say, what are you thinking about next year? Are you going to continue with this? People are very scared to have that kind of conversation for some reason, but remembering to interact at that level and take that as opportunities for feedback so that you can improve makes a really big difference as well.
Yeah, good point.
And I think the interesting thing to me about the health score part of an existing customer is, especially in software, you all probably have more data at your fingertips about your customers than you've ever had. As I think about even the chorus side of Zoominfo, of just a number of recorded conversations and the data that can produce, all the way through to the usage statistics that you see. And so it's interesting. That's why I actually love all three comments around. Sometimes you still have to have just a great customer conversation. The data is all there. The insights it produces is certainly valuable. But Hank, to your point of keeping the human part of this equation too, matching those two things up, what's the data telling me? What's the insights that I can get out of that data? And then pairing that up with what's the human behavior that's occurring and what's the human conversation we need to have? I think that's incredibly valuable along the way. And I would hate for that to get lost, which leads me to this. In your organization, who is leading the expansion conversation? And who is contributing to it? And do you like that arrangement today?
I would say the best interactions are when it's both, right? We talk about eliminating the handover. Mm-hmm. The expansion conversation was with the original AM they had at the beginning, and with the CSM that they've had throughout their implementation. It makes for a much more comfortable conversation. So I've seen that to be the best account teams have that conversation in a pod.
Amanda or Tony, what's your sentiment?
Well said. I think it is both. It's fascinating to see how many good, rich upsell, cross-sell conversations or ideas or opportunities come up when you have a good relationship with a customer and you've implemented the right way. So working that relationship, because you may, depending on how your sales structure is organized, you may have sales folks that are just in to start. But we're identifying a ton of great opportunity over time that we then, I don't have my CSPs trained in the commercial aspects. We've got our renewal center that does as part of that, but we're identifying great customer references. So we do a lot with customer reference. And then we do identify quite a few upsell, cross-sell opportunities that we then funnel back into sales and try to make sure that that's an efficient process that we then re-engage. So constantly looking at it. I think it's both though. Hang, you said it very well. Can't be just one. It's got to be a combination.
I would agree with that. Everybody said.
I remember in our prep call, Doug, you had asked, where does your renewal sit? And we collectively sighed. And, and we were all like, oh, I roll sigh. And I would say, no matter where it sits, as long as the customer can't tell, that's a win.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that a lot.
Right?
I like that a lot. So there's been a lot of agreements amongst the four of us on this call so far about what makes for a great implementation, a great customer experience that leads to expansion. This was not in the prep question, so I'll give everybody just a moment to think. But what is the one viewpoint you hold about customer expansion that you think others would disagree about? What is the one viewpoint you hold about customer expansion that you think others would disagree about?
But
Like I said, I'll give folks a minute. And folks, if for the folks listening, if you've got some ideas on that question, what's the one opinion you've got about customer expansion that you think others would disagree about? Drop it into chat. Happy to see it there. We'd love to get some thinking going, because I don't think every organization has solved everything about the motion, but I'm interested if anybody has a strongly held opinion about expansion that others might disagree about.
I guess I do, and I don't know if it's
please.
or not, but
Let's see.
I've worked for a number of companies in the past who had a first product that worked really well and a second product that didn't work as well. And as the sort of post-sales leader, when they buy that second product, it's just can be brutal. And sometimes it can poison their trust and their perspective on the first product. And this isn't true at the company I'm at now, but I've definitely lived this life throughout my career. And so I think my controversial opinion, which is probably not amazing, is if you don't have a second product that can deliver clear value and raise the opinion, then it might be better not to sell to it. Like, it might be better to focus on something else.
Oh, you can tell we've got post-sale leaders on the phone right now.
Right. Well, controversial. Yeah.
I'm laughing because we're supposed to come up with something we disagree with. And mine was going to be around when you have the post-sale conversation, when it's appropriate. And and it's similar but different to what Amanda said, which is like, maybe you don't. Like, if your product's not good, or not ready for that conversation, like don't upsell crap to your customer. You know what I mean?
Like that.
So I think that it's more of a provocative question than it is a point. I think people would disagree, but I think it'd be interesting to really map out truthfully when you have that conversation. Are you doing it all along? Are you doing it only at renewal time? I think that's something to ponder on. Tony, we gave you as much time as we could, man.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's super controversial. I don't know if I have an answer to it, but I don't think we'll ever get compensation right. Because we got a lot of smart folks working on a lot of things, and if you need a PhD to figure out how your comp plan works, it's probably not right. And it's hard to balance and optimize between an effective comp plan to drive growth in your sales organization, while also making sure you're committed to driving value for customer and a post-sales organization. So I've been at this game for a bit and trying to work through comp plans, and they get marginally better, but they're not really good. And we got to figure out how to solve that. So I don't know if that's controversial. It's just as we're getting ready, to kick off next year, I'm like, I don't know if we have a stellar comp plan yet. So you try to get the best that you can, but not optimal.
I agree that the sentiment is not controversial. It would absolutely be controversial if you got 5 different sales leaders in a room and then ask them the best way to compensate upsells across sales and customer success.
Sure.
That would be difficult, because I'd hear 5 different answers. As we where my mind goes in the conversation here, coming off of the back of that conversation, is what is the best advice that you've got for sales and customer success to work together in service of expansion? Because I think it's been interesting to see across the last 10 years the rise of customer success, both human first as well as tech first, digital first on the customer success side. But at the same time, we see a ton of different sales models. We see some that split the AE and the AM. We see some that one seller owns it the whole way through. But I'd be interested in this group's thoughts on what are some of the best ways you have seen sales and customer success partner together in service of expansion.
My enablement hats. I'm sorry, Tony, go ahead.
Go ahead and go for it.
My enablement hat says preparation is key. I mean, we don't do enough of that. How much do we actually document on paper? Who's going to be in the meeting? Who's going to say what on which topic? Because everyone sort of jumps in at the same time. when you're not preparing, like, my father was a lieutenant colonel in the South Vietnamese army. So I always go back to looking at military operations, right? What do? They prepare, they practice,
They prepare.
they execute, and then they do a post review and they prepare again. So that's kind of, I think that would be the biggest key, especially if we're really trying to do a service to our customers by approaching them in a pod, making sure everyone knows their role at that conversation. When you've earned the right to have that special time with your customer, I think that is really key.
Well said. I think building on the preparation is early. Get engaged early. Where I see cases, and we're trying to co-locate in some of our markets where I have sales and post-sales co-located, early involvement with a customer is always good. Always good. Every time I've seen it, and it gets alignment around the preparation, you have a good sales plan, you have a good value adoption plan early. The earlier, the better.
Awesome. Amanda, any thoughts from your side on best alignments, what you've seen work?
I really like a RACI. I'm a big fan of RACI methodology, having a RACI, understanding exactly what the roles are in general. And then in each meeting, like in some meetings, it's one person has a lot of credibility, and then being able to deliver a certain message as a trusted advisor for another person to be able to follow up and have a commercial conversation about that message is a very, very good strategy. And so I do think some scripting and some preparing, as Tony said, is really important when it comes to doing that effectively.
Awesome. I appreciate all three of you joining us here today on the panel. And I want to do one final question here around the horn, and that's this one. What do you foresee in 2024 around customer expansion? Going to get harder, easier, stay the same as it was in 2023? We'd love just a little bit of prediction from the group. What does customer expansion look like in 2024 for your organization?
I think it's going to be harder. I think it's going to be another year of tight budgets, and certainly not budgets expanding next year. And I think it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
I definitely think the macro environments are going to be harder, but I think it's going to be a bigger opportunity for us because we're getting smarter. AI is going to help us do some things, and we're really focused on value. So it will be harder to realize, but I think we'll do a good job realizing it. So it'll increase substantially in 2024. It better. How about that?
Hope is not a strategy, Tony.
I'm optimistic.
And you get the last call.
On that note, I think I'm going to be the hopeful one. My hope is that we're going to be more thoughtful about visiting our customers face to face, cabs, and in that motion to be able to really understand where the value is, using AI to look at the data, making digital first recommendations to them. Right? Again, balance of sales and retention. There was some commentary in the chat about you got 5 sales leaders in there and they really want you to upsell, but your upsell product is crap. Do you sell it or not? If we have those really honest conversations, I think at a minimum, we'll be able to retain the dollars again by trading services. Again, like with Zoominfo, we have such a rich portfolio. Why would you not? Because if you don't invest, you're going to fall behind. If we can get that conversation across to our customers, I think flat is a win, but I really, really think the best of the best will be able to upsell and expand.
I hope that will be true. And I think it might if we do our jobs right. But thank you again, Hang, Amanda, Tony, and to the audience out there. Please connect with all three of them. Great leaders in this space and who have some great thinking about this topic and more. So I appreciate all three of them coming on today.